This episode of Skirmish Supremacy is brought to you by Reformation Brewery, the official beer of your game night.
Someday. Oh, it started. A few moments of silence. Except for not really. Good evening, folks. This is Nick. Tim will not be joining us. This is episode 111 of Skirmish Supremacy. And instead of Tim, I have Dan Adam from Paint All the Minis.
Hey, how's it going? Good evening.
Good evening. All right, so actually, Dan asked me earlier this week to be on his show. We exchanged information, and so I was on his show. I don't know when exactly that'll air. This will probably air before that one, because Dan is in the process of getting ready to move, and he's been getting all his stuff sorted before he does.
Yeah, that's right. I've been really trying to stack up the podcast episodes so that there's no downtime between me having a little bit of a summer break and move into a different country. You're pretty much going the exact opposite side of the world from where you are right now. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't like to do anything by half. So, go and see what it's like over the other side of the world for a bit.
There you go. Which is definitely cool. We were talking about it before the show, a little bit of an adventure. Hopefully you get some high-speed internet and you can ensure that you keep up the podcast.
Yeah, that's the plan. That's the plan. I've already kind of scoped out a lot of different things, so fingers crossed it's all going to be good.
I guess the important question is, have you scoped out the game stores?
Yeah, well, that's actually a project that I set myself. We're starting up the Paint All the Minis podcast and the Paint All the Minis Facebook group. I quite enjoy setting up that electronic community. So when I decided to move, there's no game stores in the city that I'm moving to. So I'm moving to China, a city called Shenzhen, China, which is a city of 20 million people. So it's not a small place. It's about 20 minutes away from Hong Kong. So the closest game stores will be in Hong Kong, but there's none in the city that I'm moving to. So it's a little challenge that I've set myself to kind of document my journey, trying to find people to play with, and try and add to, create, be part of some sort of gaming community there. So it's an exciting challenge.
That sounds amazing. Actually, when we were talking before, I mentioned being in Kuwait, and towards the end of the time I was in Kuwait, I stumbled on mini wargaming, and that was what kind of got me back into wanting to do wargaming. I had been out of it for a while. Mm-hmm. And I started looking, and like a couple weeks before I left, I finally found that there was actually a game store, like a nice big size game store. Kuwait, it's not a very big place, so it was like 20 minutes away. I was like,
yeah.
All this time I could have been painting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've kind of started off some mini spin-off podcasts where I just figure out what's going on. So I've interviewed a guy, Sonny, who lives in Hong Kong, to talk to him about what goes on. He plays a lot of Flames of War. He plays a lot of kind of Second World War tabletop games. So I spoke to him, and that was really a really good insight. It seems to be that in Hong Kong, a lot like England, but I've never gamed in England because I've only gamed in America when I moved here. It's all club related. So instead of going to play at a local shop, you go and play at a local club. And you pay some dues, and they hire a room in a community center or something, and you go and play as part of a club. So it's not necessarily tied to a shop. So that's really interesting. And obviously, in a big city like Hong Kong, real estate is really, really expensive. So a lot of the shops are really, really small. So they have to make difficult decisions about what games to stock and what not to stock. So he was saying that basically they choose a game and they basically solely stock that. So it's you have to it's a little bit of a gamble about what they're going to have and what they're not going to have.
That's interesting. Like you said, it's a lot like England. But you didn't start gaming till you came to the States?
No, it's a really new thing for me, really. Probably only 3 years. So the podcast is just over 1 year old. The Paint All the Minis Facebook group is just over 2 years old. And I've only been gaming for 3 years because I work in a job where the social life, when you move away from your family and your normal friendship group, your social circle is who you work with.
Yes.
But the problem with that is that all you end up doing is your common point and your common interest is work. So if you're not careful, you just talk about work the entire time, which I hate because I love working hard. I love my job. But at 4:00, I want to just leave it and I want to go and do something else. So I found that when I'd invite friends around for beers and we'd go out for meals and things, we'd just end up talking about work, which, so you basically just 24 hours at work. So I decided to try and do something that was completely unrelated to what I do. So I could have that complete mental disconnect from everything. So I just picked up a box of Space Marines and I said, I'm going to paint it and I'm going to play 3 games. And depending on how that goes, we'll see how it goes. And then 3 years later, I'm where I am. So it's been a crazy, amazing, interesting journey that I've been on.
And I have that X-Wing meme that goes by, got a couple of little X-Wings. It's you and the kid playing. The wife's like, what's that? Oh, it's just a little starship game. It's nothing. Next panel, the room is full of it. And, I don't know what's happened.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And it's been amazing. It's been, what I love about it is just, one is just how deep and diverse the hobby is. Just even the painting aspect is amazingly engaging without even talking about the actual play in the game and how much of my brain time is just dedicated to just thinking about the hobby. It's amazing. But then the second part of it is just the amazing people that you speak to and the amazing people that you meet. Speaking to you on a podcast is something that I never even considered happening a year ago. It's amazing to have had these doors opened to this new world and just speak to amazing people and do amazing stuff. And it's just fun.
It is. And it has been, this podcast, your podcast, your community, my community, all the people that we've met. Have you been to any conventions yet?
No, I mean, with working in education, which is what I work in, I don't get to choose my holidays. So, I've only been geeking around for like 3 years. So, the first year and a half, I wasn't even aware of like game cons and what they were. I was someone said something con, I just thought of like, oh, that's where like Star Trek actors go, and you kind of just fawn over them for a little bit of time. So it's only fairly recently that I've heard about Adepticon and Gen Con and all Warzone Atlanta and all these kind of big events, Kubla Khan, there's all these things. And so it's one of my regrets as I leave America that I won't have been able to get to one of these things, because I guess it's even better than speaking to someone on Google Hangouts like I am with you now, because you get to meet them and you get to, really speak to these people face to face, which is much stronger than just speaking to them over a phone call or on Skype or on a Google Hangout.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Not to rub it in or anything like that, especially since you're leaving. But it is a great experience. I mentioned to you, doing all the stuff that we do for the podcast and all that. I know for me personally, it started kind of, hitting a downward slope, and it was like I spend all these hours or this and that, and then went to Adepticon and it's like boom, ran into it's amazing because there are so many amazing people in this hobby. Whether it is just talking to them, there's people that I still haven't met that I've just talked to through this mic.
Yeah, it's really cool, and just that idea of having like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 like-minded people in the same place, because if you're not careful, the hobbying can be quite a kind of insular activity. I'm sitting at my hobby table, you're sitting at your hobby table, you got your headphones on, you listen to some music. It's quite easy just to be completely segregated from everybody else and it be your own thing. And if you want that, that's fine. But that was another reason with the Paint All the Minis Facebook group was I wanted to kind of connect with other people that were sitting in the same part of their house as me at their hobby table, painting similar stuff. I wanted to kind of try and connect with those people and be like, I did a thing, what have you done? And it's not necessarily about painting to an amazing standard and showing that off. It's about like sharing stuff that you've done and bringing that kind of positive community spirit out of things, which sometimes is lacking if you don't necessarily have that friendship group or that local shop to all kind of, congregate at.
Definitely. I know when I first moved to the Atlanta area, it was me and my two sons, and my wife was still in Florida working. And so it was us, and I would have to come home, get them all sorted and stuff like that. And then, when I finally had some time to myself, and I was hobbying, it could be a challenge just to, get yourself to want to hobby.
Yeah.
And then, I ended up in the hobby hangout group, and that was great. I mean, there I met tons of awesome people, but on top of that, I started interacting with, or, having people that I could go and show my work to, and could, just talk to some people and relax, at my desk in the comfort. If I just wanted to lurk, I could lurk.
Yeah. It is. It's a great thing, and lots of not lots of pages. Some of the pages that I've been on, sometimes it's kind of expected that people are sometimes a little rude, or maybe write some things or suggest some things without turning the brain on, and maybe a little bit over the top in terms of the critique that they give. And I think critiquing people's models is a great thing to do, but a positive ethos where people are happy to share the successes and the failures, and people are happy to share their work at whatever standard they perceive that to be is positive. And that's what the page is all about. It's not non-judgmental in terms of, you don't have to be a Slayer Sword winner to post. It's amazing to see loads of quality painters on there. If I take Vince Venturella, for example, just, great content that he does through Warhammer Weekly, but he's a really great guy and he puts his models out there, but he always also takes the time to give everyone some feedback if they ask for it. So it's great just to have those positive people that come on and share the work, and also just celebrate the hobby that we're in. Because the thing is, we're all on our own little journeys. There's no set destination that we're going to. I'm happy to paint to a good tabletop standard. I'm happy to. I know that if I really put the afterburners on and try my hardest, I can get it a little bit better, but I'm happy just to mooch along at my level and post up and say I did a thing and who else did a thing, and and just wow at the amazing work and encourage the people who are just starting out. And it's just all part of just that positive environment trying to create.
Definitely. And that goes along with the finished not perfect that's floated around some, and there's a video on it, and it is one of those things of okay, this is, I'm done. No, it's not perfect, but I can accept where it is.
Yeah, and then painting, the reason why I love it so much, and the reason why it's so frustrating, is because it's so deep. If you just take a technique, and a technique will take a long time to develop and to refine. And, you can't get great at it straight away. You've got to be able to dedicate time to it to get better. I always show, I've kept pictures of all the models that I've done, and I constantly look back and look to the first model. And I thought it was, and everyone does, you look at it and you think, this is amazing. This is like Slayer Sword level. I did this. This is amazing. I'm like, Mozart of the painting world. But then you do it for another couple of months and you look back and you think, wow, I've come so far. I thought that was good, but actually look at what I'm doing now. So it's a great journey to be on, and it's great just to be able to share that with other people.
Oh, definitely. And, so I've gotten serious and, like actually figuring out how to paint for about as long as you have. I know I've been in and out of the hobby for years, but that was mostly trying to paint black on white or white on black.
Mm-hmm.
I even look at some stuff. Actually, I finished some stuff just before Adepticon, and I looked at a model that I finished just for Adepticon last year, and I was like, wow. The difference. Actually, there was one Badger Games. They had a competition of paint this little alien, and I didn't actually even end up finishing it to where I wanted it. I ended up getting too busy. Mm-hmm. And so, I turned it in, and I could tell that, mine was definitely not the best one on display. It wasn't terrible, but it was definitely not winning any of their prizes. Mm-hmm. And but it still beat the pants off what I had done previously.
Yeah. One of the things we do on the Paint All the Minis page is we have a monthly painting activity. So every month we rotate around a wide variety of different subject areas. Like one is, just paint a character model. And then another one is just focus on metallics, have metallics on show on one part of your model. Another one is like weathering, like, you paint a soldier that's really going through it, And so that kind of what we do is we kind of set that up, and it runs for about 5 or 6 weeks, and you just enter a model, you just kind of paint something, and we keep it kind of broad so people can paint their armies, and whatever it is that they're doing. But we also have a theme that people paint towards that ties it all together. And then at the end of the month, end of the 6 weeks, we collate them all the pictures, and we make a video where there's about 3 or 4 of us on a rotation. We kind of talk through all the different models and pick out what we like about them. And then the person who does the video picks a winner, and that's the banner pick for the month. And what we found with that is it's really successful because it's that motivating factor. It's always saying about this social aspect of it. If you're just sitting in your house, you have to set your own deadlines. You have to, motivate yourself. So if the paint page can give a little bit of friendly motivation and help us to diversify our skill set, try something a little different, really try hard to get a certain effect on a model, and then we all get to watch the video, and then you might be the banner pick at the end of the month. It's really that positive, friendly motivation. It's a time where, you go into the gym and you go to your gym with your friend, but you don't want to go, but your mate phones you up and says, hey, mate, it's gym night tonight. And that motivates you to go and do it, instead of just being on your own. It's like together we're stronger.
Definitely. It is definitely encouraging. I seem to, set my deadlines of, hey, we're going to do this event and, it's 2 months away. All right, I'm going to wait till a week out.
Yeah, I was watching a video on that just the other day, actually. I think I've got a podcast bubbling away on it, but it was a TED talk on procrastination. And I forget the name of the guy that was talking about it, but he said there's 3 things in your brain. There's the rational decision maker. There's the instant gratification monkey, and then there is the panic monster. And he's saying basically the instant gratification monkey wants to do things that are fun and easy. And that's what he wants to do the entire time. And the only time the rational decision maker takes charge is when the panic monster sets in. Like you're saying, if you're saying, I've got to paint all these for Adepticon. So then you're 2 weeks out from Adepticon and the panic monster comes out and goes, whoa! And then then the rational decision maker takes the phone and goes, right, let's work and let's paint all night to get this done. We need to paint all night. And you do it and you complete it. So this guy was really interested. I'm trying to kind of, think of a podcast that I can kind of pull those threads together. But it's really interesting. And he was basically arguing that everyone's a procrastinator. And, we just need to make sure that we set our own deadlines, but we don't see those deadlines as pressures and things like that. And to be happy with progress, not necessarily success the entire time.
Right. So the funniest thing that I find with myself is that, I'll be like, yeah, I can totally achieve this and I'll procrastinate. And part of it is like, I've set this as my goal, and suddenly it becomes 100 times more effort than what it was when, whatever. I could be painting that stuff for weeks upon a time, have no desire to stop painting it, and then say, all right, I'm going to do this with this stuff that I've been working on for weeks on this date. Yeah, all of a sudden, hey, that's shiny. I want to work on that.
Yeah,
and I've done it so many times. It gets frustrating because it's like you said, that instant gratification monster.
But also, as long as you're having fun with it, who cares? I have each week I have like a random question of the week that I put up onto the page, and we talk about a lot of subjects. It's called Random Question for a reason. And one of the things that came up was this idea of hobby guilt, and I use that term guilt, but I actually thought about what that word guilt means. There's a lot of negative connotations to that word guilt, saying, I have hobby guilt that I haven't painted this model to the standard that I want, or I didn't match the box art, or I didn't spend enough time on it, or, I should have done better. But it shouldn't be called hobby guilt. As long as you're having fun, it's serving its purpose. So I always have about 3 or 4 different projects on my desk, and I hop around like you. I think, I'm painting this for a bit, and sometimes you're really into a project and you're loving it and you're all over it, and other times, you're just not into it at all, and that's okay, that's fine. But there's a lot of people, and as I've spoke about it more and more, there's a lot of people that really kind of hate on themselves and saying, I need to get this done. It's like, dude, the world is going to kick your ass enough. Stop kicking your own.
You're right. I mean, definitely right. But at the same time, it's that you've got to set goals, otherwise you meander. And that's where that you're going to beat yourself up.
But if you're happy to meander, it's fine. And that's what I was saying before about being unique and original and finding your own way, is that if you're having fun meandering, if you're having fun with 5 different projects that you never really finish, then that's okay. No one says you have to finish a project. I found that I'm most motivated, like yourself, when you're painting for an event, or you're painting to play your friend next week, or you want to finish your Silver Tower box set, so when you play it next week it looks great. You definitely, if that motivates you, then that's fine. But it's not a problem as long as you're having fun. Who cares what you're doing?
Right. I mean, in the end, well, I don't know. I've done enough events and set myself enough goals that it becomes a chore, especially when I want to. It's because I want to have this done, and I also know that I procrastinated the hell out of actually getting to it. But then sometimes you learn new things, or you force yourself to try new things that are supposed to help you get better and be better.
There's 2 modes that I have in my painting. I have trying to get it to a very good tabletop standard as quickly as possible, so just refining those techniques, streamlining those, efficient painting, getting it up to the standard that is pleasing to the cursory glance as quickly as possible. And then I've got really, really taken my time and trying to master techniques. But what I've found is that I play a lot of bolt action, and I have 2 Sherman tanks, and one of them I just did a basic tabletop job, and another one I really went to town on it, and I did like oil paint rendering. You get oil paint and put lots of different colors on and blend them all together, getting a really nice effect. And I did that, and on the tabletop you can't really tell the difference between it. It's only when you look at it really close that you see the biggest difference. So if you're painting for tabletop and if you're painting to play, you can get a great effect very, very quickly. And so my 2 modes are get it good tabletop, let it slide. And then also it is great to take your time. And like doing that oil paint rendering was an amazing experience. But would I do that across an entire army? No way. It just takes far too long, and it'd just be soul destroying for me personally.
Oh, most definitely. And, you bring up a great point on, at the tabletop, or, it's called, arm's length.
Yeah.
I realized that, with a lot of the stuff that I was painting, this was just a little while back, I was working on all these little details, and, I'm sitting with it inches from my face, trying to, get all this detail, or there's this little bit off, and getting frustrated, or taking those pictures but zooming way in on the miniature, and and then you're looking at it and you can pick out everything that's wrong with it, and it's like, but hold on a second, take it and place it an arm's length away and go, no, it looks fine, it looks great.
Yeah. And that's where some people get a lot, I know myself included. Only recently I've been able to let that go, but you kind of beat on yourself a little bit, and you get that guilt maybe of, I should be trying harder, or I'm cheating by not doing that, or dry brushing, I'm just going to dry brush that and that's wrong, I should be doing edge highlight. And it's like, no. If you're having fun and if it serves its purpose, no one could tell you that you're doing it wrong.
This is true. I've seen those people who try to tell you you're doing it wrong. It usually doesn't go so well for them. Which is the nice thing in the community, is that there are a lot of people that are like, they said they're happy.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter what your opinion is. They're happy. But so you've mentioned Silver Tower. You mentioned that you picked up Space Marines and that you play a lot of bolt action. What other games do you play?
I've turned away recently. Probably, I think I mentioned I picked up Space Marines, but I don't play 40k anymore. And I don't play Age of Sigmar. I just find personally that I don't enjoy those games. They're okay, but they don't really grab me. I'm not sure why that is. I think maybe because the group that I started playing with are very, very experienced in those two games, and it's a very steep learning curve. But I just found that I just wasn't enjoying it. So what I tend to play a lot now are like GW box games, because I love GW because the models are great. So I've got like Space Hulk, Blood Bowl, Assassinorum, Execution Force, Silver Tower, as I mentioned, and a few other kind of box games from GW, because I get to interact and paint with paint the models, but you get a standalone game. One thing I really this is really relevant at the moment with the 40k FAQ that came out. I find it really difficult to keep up, and I find it so big that it's really hard to keep track of. So I much prefer those kind of sealed standalone box games because I know what it is. I can leave it for a few months, come back to it. It's exactly the same. But the two kind of tabletop games that I play mostly are Flames of War, which is 15mm World War II game, and Bolt Action, which is a 28mm World War II game. I'm really interested in history. So that kind of is great. But what I find with Bolt Action is it's got a few cool dynamics that I really enjoy. It's quite simple in nature in terms of there's not like a trillion weapons with lots of different strength and different things. It's all pretty standardized, but there is a different flavor in there. But also, as no doubt a lot of listeners are aware, it's got like a kind of each unit has a dice which goes into a bag. And there's no kind of turns as in I go, you go. Basically, what happens is one player picks a dice out, and if it's your color, you get to activate a unit. And then once you've activated that unit, someone else pulls a dice out, and then so on and so forth until every unit is enacted. So that's really cool, because I found with 40k is that I could spend 15, 20 minutes like not really doing so much. And especially with this, like, first turn alpha strike, I could find that half my army is wiped out, before I've even done anything, which is a little frustrating at times. So I like Bolt Action for that. What I also like Bolt Action for is like the army builds. What I find with 40k especially is that, not that I'm looking for like super realism, but I just found that there was a lot of models concentrated on a board, and it kind of didn't really seem very tactical in nature. It basically just seemed like, two sides just laying into each other, and there wasn't really a lot of, unless there's a lot of terrain on there, it didn't really seem super tactical. So with Bolt Action, the way that the lists are built, the toys or the big toys that you can have, like the big powerful units, you can only have like one or two per side, and it seems like this table is a lot more spaced out, and you have got that kind of ability to be tactical and move around into flanking positions and things like that, which I really like.
So I haven't actually played Bolt Action yet. I have picked up some of the stuff because I have been interested in playing it. I've played Flames of War a couple of times, and actually I bought a lot of Flames of War stuff because a local place had it on sale, and they had the 2-player box. And I had a friend of mine who was splitting the taking the Germans while I was grabbing all the American stuff. So I have a load of tanks and infantry, and then I bought some half tracks and things like that.
Yeah, I like Flames of War. Flames of War has moved on to version 4 now, and for the people that have played previous versions, they're kind of a little bit salty about it. But I wasn't entrenched in version 3, so I don't fully know what all of the changes were. But because it's a 50mm scale, I don't know. There's something about that scale that I really enjoy. Again, it's that whole kind of this idea that the 6x4 board there's space to move around, there's space to get out the way. And that's what I felt was lacking a little bit in 40k for me personally, is that it didn't really matter where you went because people were just going to shoot you anyway, unless there was a lot of terrain on there. So I find with that 15mm scale, you can get more of those toys that you can't necessarily get with 28mm scale, and you can be a little bit more tactical with your movement and think about your movement a lot more.
I agree fully. Actually, Tim and I were talking about different games, and we were talking about playing some of the, like mass battle games. He and I played a lot of Kings of War at one point in time.
Yeah.
And the part that irritated me was that if you put out some of the terrain pieces, all of a sudden it invalidated some of what you could do for lists, because there just was no way, like if you wanted a horde of cavalry, it's huge, the template of it. And if there's any bit of terrain, all of a sudden your advantages of being on horses is gone.
Yeah.
So it's just super, super frustrating in the fact that you could get, you could have the opposite problem that, you were talking about with 40K, which is, there wasn't enough terrain. You could have terrain that just ended up being too dense, and that could be 2 hills.
Yeah. I picked up the old Games Workshop game. It's called the Battle of Five Armies, which I think it's officially like 8 mil scale. But it's like War Master. So War Master is the main game, but then they put out a Battle of Five Armies, Lord of the Rings Battle of Five Armies box set. So it comes with like 2 armies. You get an army of like kind of goblins and wargs and all that kind of stuff, and orcs and stuff, and then you get like an alliance of men, dwarves, elves, and eagles. So that is like 8 mil scale, and that is like mass battle stuff. And there's something about like having mass battle stuff that's really cool, and a War Master is all about having generals issue orders. If your generals are too far away from you, they can't issue orders and things. And so I picked War Master up. I got some War Master models, and I've got some of that Battle of Five Armies, and it's just really cool to have that extra dimension of, like I was saying, the movement and the thinking out your movement, before it just seems like, you call it hammer and anvil, don't they? In 40K, we just have a fight straight up. There's nothing much to it, and you just shoot the opponent off the field, or you drop pods, or that's just changed. You do your alpha strike and knock someone out at the start of the game. Right.
And yeah, that's what we were, concluding and looking at is, just shrinking what we were, playing for a mass battle game, shrinking down. And I'll have to keep my eyes out, because I've seen a few people with the Battle of Five Armies set.
It's quite old now, and it's quite expensive. I managed to pick one up, and I picked it up cheap, or a reasonable price, because it was missing some bits. But I was incredibly fortunate that after I'd bought it, the guy emailed me and said, I was cleaning out my garage and I found the bits that were missing. So I was like, brilliant. So I expected to have to buy them third party from somewhere else, but then he actually contacted me and sent them across. So that was fantastic. Yeah. They do actually do Kings of War in 15 mil. And I forget what the rule set is called, but they actually do Kings of War rules in 10 and 15 mil. I think they do, so you're able to do that and get that.
Yeah, I've seen people where they've scaled it down, and we've talked about playing that or something similar in those scales.
Yeah. I mean Epic, Warhammer 40K Epic. Yes. That obviously isn't supported by them, but just on the podcast recently on the Paint, in fact, coming out tomorrow, which will be April 20th, a conversation that I had with James Hewitt, who used to work for Games Workshop. He did Silver Tower, he did Betrayal at Calth, Gore Chosen, but he also did the new Adeptus Titanicus game. And when we spoke, he was talking about how it's likely that Epic will come back if Adeptus Titanicus is very popular. So, Adeptus Titanicus is obviously Big Titans, so it's like a standalone box set. But back in the day, probably 20, 25 years ago, Adeptus Titanicus came out, it was popular, and then they started releasing armies for other factions and Space Marines and things. And so he was saying that if it's successful, it's likely that that'll happen. So that'd be cool, because you can get 40K in a smaller scale, which would probably alleviate some of my issues that I have with 40K being too many models on a table, or the models being too big. If you're playing like 8 mil, 10 mil, it might add an extra dimension to it. It might kind of bring me back into GW games.
I could totally see that happening. I don't know if you go and watch Guerrilla Miniature Games on his Throwback Thursday, he plays Epic a few times, and I'm like, that is what I want to play. Yeah, is that scale of stuff, because you can have these massive armies, yet it's not really massive armies.
Yeah.
And there is that, like you said, the ability to outflank, the ability to maneuver, stuff like that. It's
Yeah,
one of the reasons
I
I've
always
been enjoying a lot of Saga lately too. Is that you have an army, but they're not massive.
Yeah, I always feel with 28 and 32 mil scale, that should be, in Bolt Action, they call it a reinforced platoon level game. So you've got, 4 squads of guys max, supported by a few bits of exciting stuff. And when I see Age of Sigmar, and especially now Age of Sigmar has gone to individually based models as opposed to unit trays, it just takes a long time to move everything around. If you've got a unit of, an army of Tyranids or Orcs, it just takes,
man,
massive amount of time just to move them.
Yes, it does. One of the last 40K games I played was against a guy who was playing Tyranids. So not only did he have like this army with these big monsters in it, which okay, not bad, but he had these 2 huge swarms of Gaunts, and it's like I think it can have like 30 Gaunts in it. So he's moving all these little guys, but on top of that, one of his monsters was then shooting out more Gaunts every turn.
Yeah.
So it was just hilarious because this board was just swarming with all these little pains in the ass.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough at times, and you got to think about what it. I mean, I'm not hating on GW, but because they're great. The thought of it is amazing. It's the games that get me excited the most. Age of Sigmar and 40K get me the most excited. But as I've started doing a podcast and as I've started testing other games, there's loads of amazing games, and this kind of links into your podcast and what you do. Is that there's loads of amazing games that are being created by loads of really nice people, and they're not getting created in this kind of massive office where everyone's rubbing shoulders and lighting cigars with $50 notes. They're just nice people in their flat, in their apartment, making a great game, and they're just doing it. And that's what I love most. Like if you take Relic Blade, for example,
yes.
Awesome game, awesome artwork, and Sean Sutter is just an amazing guy. And it's just like, I want to support you because you're a great guy doing awesome stuff, and that's great. And if there's one thing I don't like about GW is that, it's really hard to find out who wrote the rules. It's really hard to find out who did what. Whereas, when you can really get behind somebody who you can really support, that's what I like the most, supporting people doing good stuff.
Yeah, it was great. So I worked with Sean at Adepticon. I was helping him at his booth.
Oh, nice.
And I mean, I love it and I love all his stuff, but it would be hilarious because he'd be talking to somebody and, showing them stuff. And so I'd be talking about the game and, getting excited, giving them a demo. And then all of a sudden, Sean would come up and be like, I wrote the rules. I drew the art. and it's really laid back, just his way. And it'd be like, I guess I'm just going to step away because I didn't do anything. I just showed up. But it was so hilarious because it was just, like they'd just be asking questions and he'd just be, fitting it in there, but there was a lot of pride, but not like
boasting.
It wasn't, it wasn't over the top, but it was, and should be, because it is a great game that has great art. I mean, it has everything in a game that, that attracts me to a game. And then on top of that, he turned around and he also then wrote a campaign book, having never written one before in his life.
Yeah. Just because he wanted to, and he thought he could do a good job. There's another guy I spoke to a while ago now called Jason Rutherford, who created a game called Legends of Caladazia, which is like a kind of space combat game. And so it's not a game that I'd heard of actually. But when I spoke to him, I was like, "So what made you do it?" And he said, "I just wanted to make a game." And I was like, "Did you ever think about going to Kickstarter? Did you ever think about, And he's like, "No, I just wanted to make a game." And I was like, did you ever think about going and joining, a game company, to learn and to develop? And he was like, well, I did do, but where I live, I think he lives in Michigan. He said, well, in Michigan, there's not really many games developers and companies, and I like where I live, so I just decided just to make it. And I was like, that's brilliant. Why don't more people just do that? Sometimes you think you have to go and work for GW or you have to go and work for a big company. No, you just made a game, and that spirit is amazing.
Yeah. It definitely can be. Tim has, Tim's been inside the industry for a long time now. And so it'll be funny because sometimes we'll be talking about something and all of a sudden he'll have, some outline of a rule set put together. Mm-hmm. And the funniest part with that is then I'll get excited about it and be like, oh, well, you should do this or not do this, but, have you thought about this or, that or, and try, batting around ideas. And he's like, yep. Yeah. Not like dismissive, but, yes, I've thought of that. Yep. I thought about that. Yeah, that's planned. Mm-hmm. And it, at one point it got like frustrating. I'm like, there's no way he could have, like all these thoughts could have happened. It's just, there's no possibility. But then with my, own project, Snowball Warfare and working with some people, they've thrown stuff, there's been some people that, coming late into it, are like, ooh, what about this? Yep. Got that on a list. Yeah. Yep. Got that on a list. Yeah. Or even, when I did a major change in the game and took it from, you had a team of people to just one person. Uh-huh. One of my characters was going to use a drone and it was going to shoot a bunch of snowballs that, it was more like an artillery and it was going to land in a bunch of tiles because, your group is like together or whatever. So, he could bombard you. Mm-hmm. And, I was like, well, that doesn't work anymore. But how do I do it? And I was like, I want him to have like a snowball machine gun, but I don't want just a snowball machine gun. And, all of a sudden I was sitting there for days and Matthew Weaver, who did a bunch of concept art for me, he sent me this video of this guy who converted a leaf blower into a snowball machine gun. Yeah. And it was hilarious. And I was like, this is what, I was sitting there and it was like 2:00 in the morning because he's actually in Australia. And it's like 2:00 in the morning when I see this, I half wake up and I'm like, not very awake. And I see that I have a message and I'm looking at the message and I click on the video and I like jumped out of bed. I'm like, yes, this is it.
But that's like kind of next level hobbying, isn't it? It's like you're taking it to a new level. And that's what I see as a podcast. And I mentioned this to quite a few people now is that you kind of, say, how do you define success and where are you taking it? And my answer is like, I don't know where it's going. And how I define success is if I have fun speaking to you, it's served its purpose for me because the podcast and keeping it going is a higher level part of the hobby for me. Because it's just great speaking to different people and it's great finding out people's stories and saying, hey, how did you end up where you are right now? Or, and the thing with the Paint All Minis podcast, it's not just about speaking to industry heavyweights. I speak to just average people who are just like me, who sit in their hobby area painting stuff, because everybody's story is interesting. And so hearing that story from you about creating that game and taking that step forward, it's amazing because it's just interesting because instead of just, sitting and watching TV and complaining about your job, not that you do that, but it's great just to be like, you're actually being proactive and doing something more and really kind of utilizing your kind of consciousness to get stuff done, which is amazing. It's just amazing to hear all those stories.
It is. And like you said, with Paint All the Minis or, here on Skirmish Supremacy, having the people on, like Sean is one of my favorite people to have on because he gets so excited about his stuff. Mm-hmm. And, there's been more than once where either during the podcast or after we're talking about something and we say something and he's like, ooh, I got to write that down. Or, when we were at Adepticon, I was talking about, maybe a new ability card for a warrior or whatever, where if they just end up missing their rolls, or if actually it's more, if the defender manages to like make their armor to block the fighter, the questing knight, maybe he has has an ability that he can take that then he can get a free attack where he uses his elbow and he jabs you with the elbow. It might only be like a +1 attack, in Relic Blade or whatever. It's not a lot, but it's just something else to kind of soothe that burn of, man, I just totally whiffed on that.
Yeah, that's right. Those moments, those epiphany moments, those are probably like things that I enjoy the most. In the Paint or the Minis, it's about people's journey, people's insight, people's history. And there's numerous times where I speak to people and I call it that kind of like ping moment or the epiphany moment. And there's a few that jump out, and there's stories that you don't get. When we kind of just look at a rule book, and you see like Andy Chambers on it, or you see Sean Sutter on it, you don't really know who that is. It's just a name on a piece of paper. But when I speak to these people and when I hear the stories, I take Andy Chambers, for example, ex-GW, and he made most recently Blood Red Skies and Drop Fleet Commander. He basically was not really doing so much. He had a motorcycle accident and he was sitting in hospital and he got a White Dwarf to read, and he just saw that they'd created Titans, for Adeptus Titanicus. They created Titans, but there wasn't any rules for them. So he got someone to bring like a typewriter, because this is back in the day. He got someone to bring a typewriter to the hospital, and he just wrote some rules, because he was like, I need to do something in my life. I've had this accident. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. And so he just wrote some rules and then just took them to GW. And then they just hired him. And when he created a Battlefleet Gothic, he was just like, this game needs to be made. So he just scratch built a ship from nothing and took it to the powers that be. And we're like, we need to make this game. And this is what I want one of the models to look like. And those ping moments, those epiphany moments are amazing. And it's so good just to hear them, because you kind of think like people like Rick Priestley and all these kind of big, massive people, you think that you kind of put them on this higher plane, but you don't realize that they're actually just people like you and me that just did stuff. They didn't just watch TV and complain. They went and did stuff. We spoke to Graham McNeil recently as well. Amazing writer for the Black Library. He's done so many different amazing books. And he said that he was working at in an architect's office and he hated it. So he went downstairs and he'd been aware of hobbying and he played, D&D a lot all growing up. And he just picked up a White Dwarf. He saw that it was an advert for a staff writer. And he just applied for it because he hated his job. And that story, that epiphany, that ping moment is amazing. And like you're saying about creating this new rule, and Sean just goes, oh, this is amazing. It's great to share in some small component part. And it's great to hear about that person's journey. It's amazing.
It is. Because there's passion in it. There's the desire. There's that hunger, and yet you see it being satisfied by what they're doing. So last night we had Corey Scott of the Witchborn on.
Oh, nice.
And today he launched a second Kickstarter that's bringing in a new faction called the Daughters of Twilight. It's Dark Elves. And, sitting there talking to him, Tim's been a big fan of the Witchborn. He's helped with some of the development, bringing in his stupid wolves. Not that I have anything against them at all. But it's fun to talk to Corey, because he is so passionate about his game and loves everything about it. And, all his little stories of, oh, well, there was these people doing this, or there was these people doing that, in different events. It's amazing to find it and, to just see it.
Yes, to shine a light on it as well, because like I was saying, with all these people that I speak to, and no doubt the people that you speak to as well, is that the majority of the time they're incredibly modest, and they don't seek out kind of appreciation, and they don't seek out the spotlight. It's not like kind of Tom Cruise going on a talk show. That just doesn't happen in the game industry. It just simply doesn't happen, because it's a niche product, and also because there's not millions and millions of dollars in it. So, but it's great to be able to shine that light and just show the person behind the work, because more often than not, the person behind the work is inspirational in many ways, because of the selfless kind of dedication that they put to things to get the gratification out at the end. If you take James Baldwin, for example, a guy who did recently the Drowned Earth Amazing guy, amazing. He sent me some pictures of him packing up all the pledges to send, and it was just him. It wasn't like this massive army of minions that he had. It was just him in his house packing up all these boxes individually. And that's amazing. That's an amazing story because you don't think about that. You know, when you get the box through the mail, you think it's this massive corporation, you know, and they've got hundreds of people working for them. Quite often it's the opposite. It's very few people just working the nuts off to give us something that's amazing.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Actually, like right after Depticon, Sean posted a picture, and it was his parents, his mother-in-law.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I saw that.
Or, you know, just some of his family and him. And, you know, I've backed a lot of Kickstarters. I'm friends with a lot of creators who've, you know, done Kickstarters. And a lot of times, yeah, they post those pictures of them fulfilling, and it's them, some of their friends, maybe, you know, that they've bribed over with beer and pizza. You know, hey, I'll buy pizza and beer if you just help me pack these boxes.
Yeah. And it's great. So it's so much fun, you know, and like you're saying, it's that higher level hobby. You know, it's just, you know, being able to speak to these people, shine a light, you know, and kind of just show other people that are interested in a hobby too, like how much amazing stuff they do. Because it's when you don't know the person and when you don't associate a person with a name on a book, it's easy to be negative. Say, oh yeah, that rule set, oh, it's terrible, or, you know, oh, there's a big flaw in this game. It's easy to kind of be critical, but when you realize it's just someone with passion doing what they love to do, it kind of breaks that down, and you kind of want to be a cheerleader for them as opposed to kind of, you know, hate on them. Definitely.
It's so very much, unless it's a really terrible rule. No, there are a lot of amazing creators out there, and it's been awesome. And I mean, you know, we haven't, you know, really talked about it, but you know, you do run a podcast that, you know, has a pretty amazing following, especially for being a year old.
Yeah, it's a strange one. It's like I was saying. I mean, anyone that speaks, I honestly don't know if it has or hasn't, because I don't know. And I know that other like historical podcasts get like 10,000 plus downloads and stuff like that. But I think that the hobby that we're in and the choice of our podcast thing, I honestly don't know. And we mentioned it a little bit in pre-show. I try not to dedicate any of my brain runtime to thinking about things that are outside of control. But I mean, I love doing it. I love speaking to people. I've been very fortunate that a lot of great people have had time to speak to me. And I'm not just talking about, you know, industry heavyweights. You know, that some of my favorite podcasts have just been with a guy that I've seen at my local shop that I've never really spoken to, but I know he likes painting. So I just kind of approached him and be like, "All right, mate, how's it going?" And then you strike up a conversation, and then you have a chat down at Starbucks, and you realize that he's done some amazing stuff. You know, so those insights are really interesting to me.
Yeah. So, you know, I guess, you know, launch a little bit into, you know, Paint All the Minis. I mean, you know, you've only been hobbying for a couple of years, but what inspired you to actually start a podcast?
Well, what came first was the paint page. The Facebook group kind of came first. And it was just a way to connect with other people who enjoyed just being on their journey. So it started off with just local people. I think it started off with like 7 people. And it was just local people who wanted to connect more. You know, so to share our work that we'd done, because, you know, like in any game store, you know, it's fighting against the grey tide. You know, the majority of people don't necessarily paint the models around my area anyway. So it was a way to kind of, you know, just share what we were doing, share ideas, just post up our stuff and say, hey, this is what I did tonight. And then it kind of quickly snowballed. And I was surprised, actually. Anything that I do, I'm kind of surprised with how it goes. And so it's kind of got to a point now where it's really kind of, you know, I think there's 2,500 people on the page, and it's just great just grabbing a coffee and seeing the diverse amount of models. You know, one thing that's great about the modern era is that there's so many pages for everything. If you say, hey, I want to paint, you know, German World War II armor, you can find a Facebook page which is just specifically German World War II armor, which is great. But you're only seeing the same thing over and over and over again. Whereas Paint All the Minis is about any model, any genre, any scale sharing kind of, people's ideas. And one thing that I've loved is that if we take 135 scale modelers, for example, they are usually like amazing at weathering, chipping, rust, streaks, all that stuff. And so I wouldn't have learned about that if I hadn't have been part of that Paint All the Minis page. And, there's a lot of things that you can learn from 40K painters. You talk about edge highlighting, you talk about contrast and sharpness of color and things. So the paint page just kind of snowballed, and it's just been great just to see a massive variety of different models and scales and genres and things. And then the podcast kind of grew out of that. And someone asked me this the other day. I honestly don't know why I started it. I can't tell you. I don't know. I think it was just because I like to listen to podcasts when I paint. And the majority of the podcasts that I'd seen were about news and tactics and list building and competition. And those are totally fine. Those are interesting. But what I wanted to do was just have a whimsical ramble chat that you can just kind of follow along whilst you're painting, and it's about kind of like the insight and history of different people. Like I said, I'm sitting in my hobby area painting, and this is how I got here. You're sitting in your hobby area doing your painting. How did you end up getting to where you are? It's just that interesting story of how did we all arrive here? Because I arrived here by chance. I moved to a different country, didn't have my usual friendship group, didn't have my family. So I got bored with talking about work all the time. Therefore, I did something completely different. And now look, and that's crazy in a way. It's like, how did I end up here? How did I end up talking to you? I feel that's an interesting story. So I wanted to figure out, well, what's your story? And where did you start? And what happened for you? Both with the people that we look up to and aspire, to be maybe, and also the people that are just like us. It's just that's why the podcast started. And I guess I've always wanted a challenge. And I guess I asked myself the question, can I do it? Can I put a podcast together? Will anyone listen? Will I enjoy it? And like I said, I love speaking to different people. And so it fulfills its purpose for me. And for as long as it's fulfilling its purpose and for as long as I'm enjoying it, I guess I'll keep on doing it, whether there's 1 or 1,000 or whatever people listening.
That's a great attitude to have for it. Because it's a good show. I've enjoyed, all the ones that I've listened to. I actually was pretty strong on listening to podcasts for a while I was driving, and then I started listening to audiobooks. And I used to be a voracious reader. I would read just like almost nonstop. Mm-hmm. So audiobooks have supplanted that because I have almost no time. So I'm almost always listening to an audiobook now.
Like multitasking.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, darn, I've got to go mow the lawn. Headphones.
Yeah, it's been interesting to go back and listen. I actually went back and listened to a few early podcast shows, and I'm sure you do this with yours, but I just kind of cringe, when you hear like early ones and you're like, oh my gosh, I'd like to think that I'm getting better. A lot like painting, you kind of refine your technique, you settle into it, you wear the seat in, so to speak, in terms of being comfortable speaking. But yeah, I tell you what, some of those early episodes is just cringeworthy. It's I'd like to think it's improved.
Right? Yes. I have, or I recall quite well some of the early shows, and I was having a conversation with a person who, actually they had posted in a group, hey, looking for podcasts to listen to while I hobby. And so, I posted, and I'll always post that, yes, I'm a part of this podcast. That's why I'm definitely biased. You want to listen to this, yeah. And throw it out there. Well, the person said that, they had listened to it when we first started, but they only listened to a few episodes, and like he named the last episode he listened to, like described what happened. I went, yep, I totally understand why you might have stopped listening at that point.
But it's hard, isn't it, mate? Because I did recently. People wanted to know about me because I purposely try not to talk on my podcast. Really, I want to find out about the other person. So people are like, we don't even really know who you are, because I don't introduce myself on the podcast, which I guess I should, but I don't know anything about podcasting, so I don't refer to myself. So I just do it, and people are like, we don't actually know who you are. So we did a podcast with me, and one, it was really weird being on the other side of the mic. Because usually, like I say, that my job is to kind of try and keep as quiet as possible and let the other person talk. So that was weird. But then, you kind of, I went through a phase of trying. I wanted it to be relaxed and laid back and kind of maybe funny. And in my first few episodes, it just seemed like I was trying really hard to be funny, and that didn't really work. And so, you kind of muddle through some things. And I just started with a laptop. I just used the internal microphone for the first few episodes, probably the first 5 or 6 episodes, because I just I didn't want to waste money on equipment that I didn't know if I was going to use or not. But they came out okay, and they were all right, and they served its purpose for a time. But then you obviously upgrade your microphone, and I was just using a basic free podcast provider. I've only just recently moved on to a podcast host, which you pay for. That's better, and it is a lot better. But it's just this idea that anyone can do it. You don't have to put financial barriers, or you say, I'll start a podcast when I get this $200 microphone. I have a $40 microphone. I have a laptop that I had anyway, and I have a podcast host which is pretty cheap to host it on. So I've learned just by doing. I've learned just going along, muddling. Only when I find a problem will I find a solution for it. I don't really. Editing, again, just hit and miss, just trial and error, just see how it goes. So it's been great just learning. Like the painting, it's just been great just learning, listening back and thinking, that was terrible, and well, that's quite good. But it's been a great experience just kind of learning the ropes and all that kind of stuff. Much like yourself, you're refining your technique over time.
Yeah. It's been amazing with the podcast because, I know I approached it as, the same thing with painting. I want it to look like this when I'm done, and, fighting to get to that point, and, learning to accept that, you're finished editing it. No, it's not perfect. Mm-hmm. It seems kind of odd, but it is, go with the bumps, go with the, the little things here or there, and accept the, the little things. You can get better as time goes on, and like you said, you started with the internal microphone and that basic stuff, both Tim and I, I started out because I had done some podcasting before a little bit. So I had a blue snowball. And I just recently actually upgraded because my blue snowball died on me. So I upgraded to a blue Yeti, which I'm definitely loving. But that's after 2 years of doing the podcast. That was one of the big upgrades. And now I've got some other stuff, other tools, and we did go to a paid host. As well, and stuff like that, just all of it, just slowly upgrading in time, and, things have become better.
Yeah. And that's how it should be, isn't it, really? Your first car is never a Lamborghini, right? You work your way up to that. I remember my first car, it was like your rickety, old, terrible car. Because you learn, you learn and you make mistakes early, and then you kind of, you move on and you improve as you go through. You never buy a 10-bedroom house to start off with. You got to get on the property ladder, and then you work up and you go through and things. And I've been, I guess, very fortunate to this point, is that the paint page has only ever seen it increase in numbers. And the podcast has only ever seen an increase in listeners. But at some point it will plateau, and at some point it'll probably drop. But that's why I try and keep the essence of what I do, of try and make it honest, try and make it fun, try and convey my enthusiasm and passion for what I do. And you can't fake that. I think the moment that I lose that enthusiasm and passion for what I'm doing, that will be when I stop doing it, because I think that is what I'd like to think is endearing about the show, is that I love speaking to these people. I'm passionate about it, and they're passionate about what they're doing, and that's what makes it listenable, I would like to think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like I said, I know the episodes where, I've started to flag, where that whole energy and all that, because, some days it can feel like a second job. if not a first job.
Yeah, and that's true. And it's like, I think that when you put together something that you put out for public consumption, you're putting yourself, you're showing a vulnerable side of yourself. You know, you're putting a little bit of yourself into it. And I think every one of us, every person that puts something out there, you get some positive feedback, you get some negative feedback, you know, but it's like, we do this for fun. It's not, I mean, some people say to me, you know, oh, the sound is terrible. You know, I think, yeah, because I've got a cheap microphone. That's why. And then somebody's like, oh, I can't believe you didn't ask this person that question. And you're like, well, yeah, I get that, but I've only got a certain amount of time to dedicate to this, you know? So it's like, cut me a little bit of slack. You know, if you pay me $1 million a year to do it, then the production quality will increase, because I'll put myself on a course, you know, so I know what I'm doing. I'll go on an editing course. I'll go on a radio, you know, presenting course. You know, I'll do that. But I don't have that. What I have is I have a desire and an enthusiasm and a passion to do something. So, you know, just leave me be.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, you know, like I said, you know, your show is great. So you've been doing a good enough job in my boat, you know.
Thanks, Mike.
There's only a few podcasts that I listen to, and, you know, when I you know, get around to it, and yours is one of them. So yeah. But we are drawing up to closing time, so I want to give you a minute to tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, if you want to check out, if you're on Facebook, you can type in Paint All the Minis and join the Facebook group, especially if you paint, especially if you've been painting while you're listening to this show. Come and show us what you're painting. You know, don't worry about the standard. You know, we're not bothered about that. We just want to celebrate you doing your thing and, you know, encourage you in a positive way to do your thing. So the Paint All the Minis Facebook group. You can check out the Paint All the Minis Paint Ramble group on Facebook group, and the Paint Ramble is the podcast side of things. You can check me out on Twitter at Paint All the Mini, or listen to the Skirmish Supremacy Skirmish Supremacy podcast, and follow the link through. No doubt that you'll post up on this one.
Definitely, I will be sharing out links for that. You've also got a Patreon now, right?
Yeah, that's right. That kind of links back to what we were talking about at the start about my move. You know, I kind of wrestled with Patreon a lot in terms of. I'm not sure how child-friendly a podcast is, but I don't want to be a cheeky bastard and ask people for money. So people were saying that, but I got to the point where people were messaging saying, I want to support you. I want to help out. I want to show my appreciation for it, which is like an American thing. In England, we're like, just do your job, you know, be quiet, you know, be happy that no one's complaining. So yeah, I did a Patreon, but what I've done is to kind of make it seem like a good deal. I do two things. The Patreon is not for my own personal gain. What I like to do is I like to share goodwill. Like I mentioned with a lot of the guests, they are always being pestered and badgered to give freebies away. So, you know, to go on a podcast, people say, oh, you can come on the podcast, but you have to give me a free game. Or you get people contacting saying, oh, give me a free game and I'll review it on YouTube or something. And I've never kind of wanted to add to that. So what I like to do is actually to give guests on the show something. So people that are patrons, they enable me to send out a little Paint All the Minis coffee mug, a hoodie, a T-shirt, you know, to the guests, to kind of give something back to them to say thank you from us about their awesome products. Also, what enables me to do is I love drinking tea when we do a podcast. So it enables me to get some higher quality tea bags when I'm doing a podcasting. But also it enables me to support the community. Like last month, there's a guy on the Paint All Minis page who's doing like a community paint thing. He wants to get more people painting in his local area. So he's giving his time freely to teach people how to paint in his local community. So I was able to, with the patron support, I was able to reach out to Warlord Games, and they're sponsoring his event. So they're sending some models so he doesn't have to buy them. Also, I sent him a little T-shirt and a Paint All the Minis coffee cup. So the patrons help, you know, me to support the local community and pass on that goodwill. You call it like the random acts of kindness kind of thing. But the reason that I'd like to think that it's actually worthwhile doing, on top of that, is I've made a kind of, my next challenge as I go to China is to create that physical community. So the spin-off podcasts that I do are available to patrons only, where I speak to different people about how to create a community. how to go about creating a community. So I spoke to a guy called Paul Winter, who is he does his own podcast, the War Master podcast, which is that 10 mil GW game that you spoke about. But he is like a genius at creating a community. So I spoke to him and I was like, right, give me your 10 points on how to create a gaming community in your local area. So he kind of educated me on what I should be doing. I spoke to Warlord Games about their market in China. So that was a great insight. It's like, do people in China play games? What is Warlord's presence in China? I spoke to someone who lives in Hong Kong. So that kind of spin-off podcast is available to patrons only. So Patreon, if you go onto Patreon and type in Paint All the Minis, it comes up there. So hopefully if you want to support the page, you can do it anyway. But then if you do support it, you get a little bit extra by getting the spin-off podcasts about me and pictures and videos, and the spin-off podcasts about me go into a completely different part of the world, a completely different culture. And as I keep on saying, I've got no idea what's going to happen. I just know that something is, because I'm going to find someone to play with. I don't know who that is. I don't know how often I'm going to play, but I am going to. And that's an interesting story for me, and hopefully other people might find it interesting.
So I just had a vision. You're going to have this picture or this videos that you post, and you're going to be like, I found people to play with. and all I could think of is when they show, somebody, just kind of grabs these foreigners and they're like, we need your help. And they're just kind of standing there like, what is this person saying? And they're going along with it. Like, what is happening?
Just roll that dice.
And so you're going to have these people looking at you like, I don't know what to do. And they just keep rolling a die. And
yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And, and it's very much shaped by the patrons as well. If it's going to be a little bit like a travel thing as well. I'm going to be documenting and taking pictures of the places that I go to, and the city of Shenzhen. So, I want to try and make it as rich as possible for those people who are very kind enough to support. Because the podcast is going to happen anyway, as normally, and the podcast is actually going to expand. There's lots of irons we've got in the fire to expand the podcast into RPGs and board games and things, so it's going to expand, to offer more value. And the podcast will always remain free to people. But hopefully, this little interesting kind of episodical kind of journey that I go on to will give people that are supporting the podcast and giving their hard-earned money across, even if it's just $1, it'll give them an extra little part of the story for them.
That's awesome. Just before we leave, I want to circle back to one of the things that you said, and that was when you've talked to people, or initially talked with some of your guests and all that, they've had people that are like, oh yeah, I'll do this, but I want this or that. Mm-hmm. Which is something that I never really even thought of. The first time we were about to talk to somebody and they're like, oh yeah, you want to talk to me here, and sent us stuff, I'm like, oh, this is cool. Mm-hmm. But I had one person, I saw their stuff once or twice or three times, and I'm like, you know what? Hey, this looks cool. I want to bring them on the show. So I reached out to them, and they're like, oh yeah, da 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 da. And all of a sudden, and it felt like, during the conversation, like all of a sudden you just had that person that opens up their checkbook, and they're like, so how much is this going to cost?
Yeah,
yeah, And I felt totally awkward. I'm like, whoa, no. Yeah. It doesn't cost you anything but your time.
Yeah, and it is nice, and I have been sent things periodically, but I call it playing the long game, and like yourself, it sounds very much we're cut from the same cloth. Is that you're doing it because it's fun and you're doing it to shed light. And if someone says, hey, I'd love to send you X, I'd love to send you Y, that it's a great feeling when that happens, especially because big companies do have a budget for that kind of thing. But yeah, it's just doing it because it's fun. But there's the other side of people, and they're totally right also, is that mine, and it sounds like your business model is terrible, because but that's never been what it's about for me personally. Some people say to me, if someone comes onto your podcast, you should get an hourly rate. And then if it means that you get no guests, you get no guests. You should only move. You should only get out of bed for a certain amount of money. But yeah, I don't know, because I found something that I would do anyway. So I just want to throw it out there. I don't know. I think that's a whole other podcast that we could talk about that, really, you know. But,
oh no, definitely. I just, because, I wanted to share that just like one, the weirdness of it. But it is definitely been great having you on.
It's been a pleasure, mate. It's been a nice chat.
Yeah, no, we will have to do it again. Possibly even, after you're, living in China for a bit, also bringing you back on to, kind of get an update on that, other than, what we'll hear from your own podcast.
Yeah, I'm keeping my plans close to my chest, because I don't, it's like you don't bring out the big guns early doors. You don't tell people what the ending is before you've told them the start. So I know that stuff is going to happen. And I've got a wide variety of success goals, from the wildly amazing to the subtly adequate. So something will happen. I'm just not sure what it will be yet.
Sounds awesome. So that, everyone, is Dan Adam of Paint All the Mini, the ramble and chat and all that good stuff. So, give it a listen if you haven't already. If you have, let us know what you think. And yeah, so thank you for coming on.
It's a pleasure, mate. Anytime.
And have a good evening, folks.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. To see more of the antics that Nick and I do, you can check us out on Facebook at Skirmish Supremacy. We also have Twitter, which we can be reached at Skirmish Supreme, because apparently Skirmish Supremacy does not fit in Twitter. And if you want to email us directly, you can reach us at tim@skirmishsupremacy.com or nick@skirmishsupremacy.com. Thanks for listening.